We're talking about how simple marriage is, but it's only simple if I keep the foundation. And again, if I have a house and that foundation has two big cracks in it, I'm going to have a lot of cracks in the walls, and I'll spend all my time taking care of those cracks. God has given us two simple commandments concerning marriage, but when those aren't kept, thousands and thousands of other cracks appear. And we're all the time working on these other cracks. And there's an appeal to work on those cracks because it's something that I could fix in the power of my humanity or in the power of my flesh, or it's something that I'm looking at you to fix. But we never do get back down to the root issue. And the reason we avoid these two simple commandments and these two big cracks is that they're the two things that I believe are absolutely impossible for anyone to do. And the simple commandment of loving your wife is very, very frustrating because it can't be kept. It's impossible to keep it this way. The only way you can keep it is you fall in with God, and then Christ has to keep it through you. So we keep repeating this one point, that the Christian life isn't difficult, it's impossible. The only one that ever lived it is Christ, and the only way you'll ever live it is if He lives it through you. And it has to come this way. So if we fall out with Him, it's going to be impossible to ever keep this commandment. But they're really not that difficult. And once we've fallen in with Him, I believe that love meets a deep need in a woman's life. Women love to be loved. And as I said before, if you love a woman, you don't even have to listen to the woman. The most important thing to her is that you just love the woman. And there's many, many women who have a 10-year-old need, a 20-year-old need, a 30-year-old need, just to have Dad put them in their lap and say that I love you. Little girls need to be loved. They love to be loved. I was sharing that one of my friends, I saw him in the restaurant, and he had his daughter with him. He's a great big guy, a bodybuilder, and his daughter was just beautiful. She had on a little formal wear, and her hair was all done, and she had on makeup and a little purse and her little high heels and all that kind of thing. She was just cute, really, really pretty. And I said, Lisa, what are you doing here today? And she said, it's Tuesday. And I said, yeah, I know it's Tuesday. I said, what's Tuesday? And she said, Tuesday's my date day with Dad. And her mom told me that she spends the whole week picking out her clothes and what she's going to wear, and everything's got to match so she can have her date day with Dad. Little girls love a date day with Dad. But there's a lot of little girls that were never put in Dad's lap and were never told they were beautiful and never told that they were loved. You know that it's one of the things I do is have date days with my daughter. And I'll call her and tell her to meet me somewhere, and she'll come to the restaurant, and she'll always be dressed up, and she's real pretty, and she'll grab a hold of my arm, and she's always cuddling me because she's a big feeler and a big doer, and she'll be cuddling my arm and walking with me and holding my arm. And then when we get in the restaurant, she'll always sit by me, and she'll undo my napkin, and she'll give me my water, and we'll hardly ever sit there without her reaching up and kissing me a couple of times. The problem with all that is, at her age, I look around the restaurant and there's all the older women doing this to me. And I tell her, I said, love, don't do that when we're out like that. I said, sit over there. Don't hug me. Don't be kissing me all the time. I said, all those women can think I'm some kind of sugar daddy. Well, then that just gets her going, and she's doing it all the more and all the more and all the more. Women love to be loved. And it's a very, very simple thing. Now, when it comes to men, and I'll tell you women a secret, if you want to control a man completely and totally, all you have to do is respect that man. And you'll control the man. Because men love respect. Respect controls them. I was watching an interesting program on PBS, and it was just different people in different professions. And here they interview a woman who's been a professional prostitute her whole life. It's a little 5-minute segment, and she's training other prostitutes in Las Vegas. And what she says to them is very interesting. If you just want to make a little bit of money, then you just become a prostitute. But if you want to make a lot of money and not even have to be with the men, all you have to do is respect the men that you're with. And she said that one of the things she did with men is she would just say to them, oh, your wife is so lucky to have you. Oh, you work so hard. You're such a clever man. And would talk like that. And she said, do you know, if you'll talk like that, before you know it, these men that are wealthy will be sending you a brand new car. They'll be putting you in a house. They'll be taking care of you. And she was just working the respect angle that is in every man. Every man. And again, I think we've been mistaught in saying that for men, sex is physical, and for women, it's an emotional thing, when for men, it's a very, very acceptance-based thing. It has a lot to do with respect. Men are controlled almost totally by respect. One of my favorite stories is, and you've seen Ray, and you've talked to Ray, but Ray's always talking about Kath, isn't he? Something about Kath. Kath did this, and Kath did that. And then before we go anywhere, he's got to check with Kath. He's always on the phone with Kath. I said, can you do anything without Kath? Well, I'd just like to check with Kath, brother. I'd just like to be with Kath. And so he's always calling up Kath. Well, when I went to Australia one time, I was just thinking to myself how much Ray thinks about Kath and how he doesn't act without Kath. And we had a staff meeting there, and several of the people that we work with had come over for dinner. Kath grew up as a pastor's daughter. She can put a dinner together in under an hour, a hot meal for 20 people. She moves like the wind. And you could lose an arm if you got in the kitchen with her because she's flying. She doesn't want any help. She's just moving. I'm reading the newspaper sitting in the table, and I'm watching Kath as she's working in the kitchen. Now, Ray, as you know about the Irish, they're a little bit tight, aren't they? And I was in Ireland, and I went to his house, and I saw the Andrews coat of arms. And it's a coat of arms with a fist on it like this. And they said, yeah, that's our coat of arms. And I said, I'll bet you $100 if I could pry Grandpa's hand open, there's a penny in there. Because I know that's what the Andrews do. I told some of you this summer, but I was with Ray in, where were we, Nigeria. And you can tell how tight Ray is. I mean, he hangs on to everything. And we're getting ready to go into church, and it's a church meeting of about, there's several thousand people in there. And before we go into church, they take us into a little room where a woman is giving birth to a baby. And so they want us to see this baby coming out. Well, that'll prepare you for a sermon. So we're standing there to see this baby come out, and then someone says, well, someone pray, and Ray steps forward and he prays. Well, later on, we're in the church, and this proud father comes in with his baby, holding it in the air, and brings it to the front of the congregation, and he proclaims that this new baby, and then he names the baby in front of everyone. The baby's name will be Ray Andrews Abawana. Now think of that poor kid the rest of his life. How do you explain that name? And so they've named him after Ray because Ray was the one that was praying. And do you know what Ray's response to all this was? Well, does this mean that he'll be wanting a birthday present every year? He's worried about the birthday present. Well, anyway, in Nigeria, they dance, and when they dance, they come up to the front, and they put money in big baskets, and they give it to the guest speaker. And this is very, very poor people giving this money and bringing it up. And when you leave Nigeria, sometimes I'll have 2 or 3 trash bags full of this money. And I went into the room, and Ray had the money counted, and he had it in little stacks all over the bed, and it covered the whole bed. And I said, brother, what are you doing? And he says, well, I've been counting the money. And I said, well, it won't do you any good to count it because we can't take it with us. I said, nobody will exchange that money anywhere, no bank. So I said, we can't take it with us. And I said, what we'll do is we'll leave it at one of the churches that's trying to get built and get started, and we'll leave it with them as a donation. And he said, but brother, the people really wanted to bless us with the money. And I said, well, I know they wanted to bless us with the money, and they have blessed us with the money, but we can't keep the money. You're not keeping any of the money because you can't exchange it. And he says, yeah, but they really, I said, I know they really wanted to bless us, but we can't keep it. You know, it was funny. We went to the airport. Our plane gets delayed. We're walking around. And I said, you know, Ray, I wish we'd have saved a little of that money because we could buy some water or we could buy a sandwich. And all of a sudden, I looked at his face, and I knew what Ananias and Sapphira must have looked like. I said, you held some of the money back, didn't you? You had to hold some of it back. You couldn't give it all away. I said, come up with it, come up with it. What do you got? Well, brother, you better be thankful I did leave a little bit of it. And he's got a little pad of it in his pocket. The Irish are tight. I'm sitting there reading the newspaper. Ray, she's working like mad, Kath, and Ray comes upstairs, and someone has sent him a free calculator with a pad of paper that he ordered. Now, you can imagine the quality of this thing. You hold it under a light, and it comes on. It's a little thing. And he comes upstairs in the middle of her getting ready for dinner and says, Kath, come and look at me, calculator. Come and look at me, calculator. And I thought, what is Kath going to say? She's in the middle of this dinner looking at his stupid calculator. What she did shocked me, because she went over and washed her hands and said, just a minute, love, and put on her glasses and went over and put her arm around him and said, show me your calculator. And Ray, typical Irishman, well, look at this, darling. 2 + 2 is 4. And you know what she says? You are so clever. And he goes, well, look at this, darling. 4 divided by 2 is 2. And she says, I'm so happy that I married you. I'm so fortunate that I married you. Do you know a lot of women's husbands would have to pay for these, but you find a way to get it for free? Well, the house is full of that kind of junk. They wait for him to leave town, it all goes in the bin, and it's gone. And there she is boasting over him, and she's got a hand, and Ray's got his chest stuck out, working this calculator as mad as he can, showing it to her. And I just looked at them, and I thought to myself, does Kath really know what she's doing? Does she know how that impacts a man? I wonder if she has any clue. And just when I was thinking that, they have their back to me, and Kath is like this. She looks over at me like this and goes, and then goes back to looking at the calculator. She knew exactly what she was doing. Well, then she went on to do her meal, and Ray heads down the hallway, and he says, Kath, my calculator went out. It went out. I said, you have to be in the light. That's why it went out. The genius, the brilliant man was going there. Men love respect, and women love to be loved, and it's the two things that you can't give if you're not abiding in Christ. It's the only way you'll be able to give it. It has to come this way and back down this way. So what we do then is we know that we're rebelling against a basic commandment when we're not doing that. Now, you wouldn't like talking to me some days because people come in, and I remember a couple came in, and she was from Cuba and loved a good fight. And he didn't mind a fight himself either. And when they came into the office, they'd be there for just a little while before the whole place erupted into a huge shouting match. And the next thing I'd hear is Betty's door slam, and she'd be gone for the day. And she told me, I just can't take it. I can't handle it. And so they came in and they started the fight, and I let them go for about an hour. And then I sat in the middle of him. And I said, I want to know something. How come you don't love your wife? Now, you can make a lot of money in counseling if you'll feed people's flesh. All you got to do is sit there and go, oh my, no. Your husband did what? And oh my, no, not that. He did that too. And you're still there? You make Mother Teresa look like a streetwalker. I don't see how you do it. I've never seen a level of holiness you have. That's right. You write the check out to Mike Wells, Buying Life Ministries. That's $150. We'll be in next week. I've got to hear more of this. Write it down. Do we need a journal? We've got to have a journal. I haven't. Can I use some of this material? That's how you make the big money. You don't make the big money saying this, as I said to him, brother, why aren't you loving your wife? Well, she does this. No. The Bible doesn't say you love if she does this, this, and this. It is a commandment to you. Now, how many of you women have read that passage, husbands love your wives? See, I hate it when people read my mail. It isn't written to women, it's written to men. And it's not given any, and you're not given any excuse at all. How come you're not loving? No, I want to know why you don't love. Well, she does this. No. The reason you're not loving is that you're pathetic, and you're self-centered, and you're ingrown, and all you're thinking about is yourself. And I went after him, and I didn't let him say a word. She was enjoying the whole thing until I turned it on her. How come you're not respecting your husband? Well, you couldn't respect somebody that eats like that, walks like that, talks to kids that way. No. It doesn't say that. It says respect your husband. How come you're not doing it? And I went for the throat on her. Do you know that I went 4 hours without a break? And I went back and forth on them and back and forth on them and back and forth. They were sitting at opposite ends of the room. Finally, I had to go to the restroom. I went out and I went to the restroom. And when I came back in, I snuck in and they were trying to form an alliance against me. They'd moved next to each other and were holding hands, and he's saying to her, "What do we do to get him to stop?" I couldn't believe it. They'd found something they hated more than each other, Brother Mike. And they got this alliance going against me. And so I walked in and I said, "Here's what you have to do to get Brother Mike to stop. You've got to yield to Christ. We've got to go back to the foundation. We've got to let His life flow through us. And you have to decide you can't do that, but He'll do it through you. But this is what He wants to do through you." And do you know that they had already signed the first set of papers for the divorce? They canceled that because they got back into this. What we do when we're rebelling against a basic commandment that we're given is that we want to justify the reason that I'm not loving. And just ask yourself when you're in this condition, and I'm like the Indian named Bender Dundat, when you're in this condition and you're doing this, what kind of magic are you going through to justify your rebellion right now? And we start making lists of why I don't have to keep the commandment that absolutely everyone else does. And what I'm saying is I make that list, and here's the real danger, which is more dangerous than the list. I'm saying to God that love is something that is merited. Do I want to live that way with Him? I know the grace and the mercy and the love that I've received from Him that has been completely without any contribution on my part. And I want to continue to live that way. That if you show mercy, mercy will be shown to you. If you don't want to have any mercy, then you don't get any mercy. I really want mercy. I want to live under mercy. I love the fact that today I'm living with Him in an unconditional mercy environment. That there's not anything I had to do to earn it. He's just pouring it out right now. And when we refuse to respect, we'll make the list to justify that, and then we're saying again that respect is going to be based on merit. And I just don't want to go there with the Lord. The next thing that happens is this. I've invited into myself my own way, which is love based on merit and respect based on merit, and I begin to go to pieces. We keep referring to this passage. We'll read it. Colossians 1, 16 and 17. Christ is the one through whom God created everything in heaven and earth. He made the things we can see and the things we can't see. Kingdoms, kings, rulers, and authorities. Everything has been created through Him and for Him. He existed before everything else began, and He holds all creation together. That means that Christ is the glue holding every single person together. We mentioned it at the beginning of the seminar. He's in every person. It doesn't mean that everyone's born again and they have His life, but it does mean that He's in every person. He's the glue. Now, if I invite my way in, I'll invite a solvent in myself that'll make me go to pieces. See, Christ is not imposed on a person. Christ is exposed in every person. If you don't believe that Jesus is the way, then take the challenge and live your life anti-Christ and tell me if you don't fall to pieces or not. Just take the challenge. It's a lot like mathematics. What would it be like at the bank if at the bank on Mondays all the computers worked in a way where 2 plus 2 equaled 4, but on Tuesday all the computers worked in a way that 4 plus 4 equaled 4, and on Wednesday 8 plus 8 equaled 4? What would you have at the bank? Chaos. Because absolutes are written into mathematics, not imposed on mathematics. You can't change that. Every other religion in the world is imposed on man, but this Christianity, this life, is exposed in me. Now, part of the glue that holds me together then tells me to love my wife not based on merit, to respect my husband not based on merit, but if I invite my way in and I say everything's going to be based in merit, I've invited a solvent and I punish myself and I go to pieces. That's why sin and punishment are one and the same, and they happen at the exact same moment. So we're always worried and thinking, well, one day those people will get theirs in hell. Well, I'm telling you this as a fact, they're getting it every day. It's the worst punishment that they'll ever have. And as one homosexual fellow that I was talking to, he wasn't a Christian, and he says, what are you saying? What are you saying, that God someday is going to send me to hell? I said, no, that's not the point at all. The point is you're sending yourself to hell every day in the way you live. And you know you're coming to pieces. I've counseled in that community too long to let people lie to me. It's the most petty, backbiting, falling apart community that there is. And people sit there and try to make it out to be something that it isn't. They're all going to pieces every moment of every day. And so as I refuse to do this, I start to go to pieces. And I'm punishing myself. And everything in me reacts against my way, and I end up with a pit in my stomach, and then that tries to get out of me, and it ends up in my head where I have all kinds of obsessions and problems there, and then my body ends up getting sick. Now, there's another problem then when I rebel against those two simple commands, and of course, as we've said, we rebelled against Him. We fell out with Him before we fall out with others. God created man, and the man's name was Adam. And Adam was a male and a female in the same body. So he had the characteristics of a man and a woman in the same body. It doesn't mean that he looked funny. And many people make the point about this, that the Holy Spirit is the femininity of God. One of the complaints about Christianity is that we don't have a female God. You know, people like a female God. When they've hurt someone else or they've done something wrong, they would like a female God that they could appeal to. But when someone has hurt them, they want a male God that they can appeal to that'll go and hammer them. But God does have these characteristics, and man was created in His image with a male and a female in the same body. God couldn't find anyone to fellowship with Adam, and so what He did is He took the female out of Adam. And it says twice in the Bible that God created man. And both times the man is singular. So the first time He creates him, He creates a man that's a male and a female in one body. And the next time He says He's created man, it's still singular, and it's a male and a female together. That means that a man in the Bible is a husband and a wife. If you don't have a husband or a wife, you're not a man. Now, what we're told then too is, and this is a beautiful thing, that if you're not married, Jesus comes in, the Father comes in, the Holy Spirit is there, and they fill up in you what's lacking. Do you know a lot of single people will say this to me that have really had this experience of Christ coming in and meeting the need of a mate? One of the things that they're frightened about in getting married is, well, I'll be as close to Jesus as I was. And one thing that many of us in this room will experience one day is that we may die before our mate dies. And our mate will die before we die. And we're left alone, but you'll never be lonely. Because Christ comes in and He fills up that part of you that your mate was filling. It was interesting when my grandfather died, I talked to him about that, and I said, just invite Christ in a deeper way and say, come and fill those needs that Grandma was filling. And he said to me a year later, he said, it's been the most wonderful experience. He said, I've been alone, but I've never been lonely. And he had the most growth in his Christian life those 3 years after my grandmother died. My mother died a few years ago, and my father witnesses to the same thing, that Christ has come in and met those needs and filled that up. and how much he's enjoying that in his life. So, a man is a male and a female together, the husband and the wife. Now, here's one of the problems in how we see this, is that we see oneness as two people living together with a big line in between them. And what this oneness represents is this. I've got my certain needs as a husband, and once all of my needs are met, I may have something left over that can dribble over to you. I'll give you a little bit extra over here. And the wife is living over here, seeing herself as independent from the husband, as a unique being, not as one. And then when I get all of my needs met, I might have a little bit left over for you. And so the normal way to see marriage is two individuals attempting to live together as one. But it's not what the Bible tells us. In fact, marriage is the end of my individuality and the death of that. And that today is a big problem in marriage counseling, where we continue to talk about the individuality and how much we deserve it and how we ought to hang on to it and feed it, instead of the recognition of the death of that individuality. Now let's take a little break and we'll come back and talk about how that works together being one.